This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. Ever feel like you're being pushed or pulled in more directions than you can even begin to process? When life demands more than you can give at work, in your relationship, or at home, Talkspace can help. Talkspace provides convenient online access to therapy, psychiatry, and mental health support. Just answer a few questions online and Talkspace will match you with a licensed provider in less than 2 days, with some even offering same-day appointments. Chat with a therapist over live video, audio, or messaging so you can get mental health support that fits your lifestyle and schedule. No taking time off work, no commuting to an office, and no waiting room. Just support that meets you right where you are. Best of all, Talkspace is covered by most major insurance plans with an average copay of $15. Get space when you need it with Talkspace. And now you can get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com. That's Talkspace.com.
Emotionally unavailable.
Okay, welcome, Margaret, to Emotionally
Thank you.
Unavailable. I'm glad you're here today. I'm really excited. I was just reading over again, and then I did a quick Google search. Wow. So you have written a book. Remind me the title of the book, because I've now closed out my stuff.
Sure thing. The book is A Spectacular Inheritance: What I Kept and What I Left Behind.
Ugh. I feel like the timing of this conversation is so perfect, too, because I've been talking a lot about identity and how when we want to step into a new identity or create a new, however people want to, I've been talking about it in more of like a manifestation sense, but how we can get really bogged down by this idea that we have to change everything about ourselves, and how when you have, for whatever reason, a limited capacity, or you're just in circumstances right now that limit your ability to do certain things, that really the real work and the most important stuff is more of shedding programming, shedding beliefs and people
It's true.
sometimes, and like how that really is such an important step, and that when you do that and you scrape away all that stuff that people told you were, that sometimes that's all it takes, like, to make the most change. So I love the subtitle because that's the feeling I get is, it drew me right away because, there's so much that has to be left behind. I know for myself, learning, girl, you're fine. Like, even if you never grew or evolved from the point you are right now, like, yes, obviously, there's some shifts that you can very plainly see need to be made, but you're not needing to change every last thing about yourself to be worthy of love and belonging. And I think that was because I had this huge source of shame that I was a reactive person. Oh, good God, spitting. I was a reactive person from trauma without like any real skill on where to put it. And so, I was so ashamed of myself, and just, I labeled myself as mean or a bitch or whatever, and felt very fixed in that identity. And so learning to just like get rid of those words was so powerful for me. Okay. So I told you off mic that I was going to ask you about this because, listen, I'm obsessed with cults. I'm obsessed with it. And on the surface, this moral rearmament, I can certainly see how easy it was for people to get into this, because I think we would probably see a lot of this type of new age stuff right now in our current society, like the beginning of it. Even I could see it just now forming. But okay, I want to go back. Where were you born and raised?
Okay, so I was born in Switzerland, in Lausanne, Switzerland, and that's not because my parents were Swiss, but because that was where they happened to be at the time. And so that leads right away into the fact that my parents were working for this very organization you mentioned, Moral Rearmament, which after World War II very, very intentionally tried to do some things to bring French and German people together after the war and to create a framework in which reconciliation could occur. And so this was a very bold thing to be doing. And it was not because they were highly important people. They worked with some who were fairly well connected, but a lot of people who were really quite ordinary. But they believed that ordinary people could do something to change the world if they had bold visions. And so these people actually acquired a derelict hotel above the Lake of Geneva, where actually refugees had been sort of housed in very scrappy fashion during the war. And they mobilized a whole volunteer team to sort of fix up the hotel so that they could have conferences there, and then they could invite people from the different European countries to come and talk about the Europe they wanted to see and how to build that. So it was a grassroots reconciliation project, although they certainly went to the authorities who were occupying Germany to see how to get Germans out of occupied Germany at the end of the war. They did that. So there's a lot of fascinating history involved in what my parents were doing at the time they got married, which was in Switzerland, and then I was born there. But just as I grew up, and we left Switzerland before I can really remember that, we went to America. My mother came from Hollywood, actually, which is sort of interesting. My father was Scottish. But I grew up with these parents and their colleagues who were in this massive effort to do big visionary projects to change the world. And they made it seem like this was the best thing you could possibly use your life for. It was the inevitable expression of Christianity, of all religions, really. They really had space for people of all religious backgrounds, even though it had started as a Christian organization. And there was a lot of emphasis on team building and living in community and so on and so forth. So I had all these extra people in my so-called sort of family circle. And we traveled quite a lot. We lived in different places. I quite often met up with the same people in different places. So I had slight feeling like the world was a little predictable, but we lived in quite contrasting places. And so, what did I do as I neared the end of school and high school, sort of considering my future? I had this dream that was very separate from the reality of what was going on around me, that I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to go to medical school. I felt I was doing well in school. I was smart. This ought to be manageable for me. But I mean, talk about emotionally unavailable. My parents never engaged with this interest. They never gave me any encouragement in it. And I had a slight feeling of guilt about it because they were doing something that seemed so much more important and so much more godly. Yeah. And so I was kind of trapped. And I mean, the weird thing is that nobody was being violent to each other. There was no domestic violence. There was nothing about this organization where you could say I was abused. But there was a way in which there was a lack of emotional honesty because they weren't meeting me where I was. Sure. And I had to arrange my emotional life around what they were doing. So I had quite a big dilemma. And that's what I really mean by the spectacular inheritance, because it was a massive dilemma for me. How do you kind of edge your way out of this thing? If you do, are you going to feel bad about yourself because you did and you weren't good enough? And what is everybody else going to think? And so on and so forth. And so that's the starting place for the whole story.
Wow. Okay, couple follow-up questions. One, are you an only child?
Yes.
Oh, that's even more interesting. Okay. 2, so they weren't encouraging. Were they outright discouraging of you becoming a physician?
No, not really. They weren't. It was so interesting how it was such a strong cultural impulsion towards the idea that every young person would do best to be in this, that they didn't. Although I may have seen other people, people older than me who maybe had been discouraged from leaving, but nobody was really trying to prevent me from leaving.
It's not like Scientology where they're crazy.
I think it is not like Scientology. And of course, we could get into a conversation about what makes a group turn into a cult. And there were certainly cult-like characteristics in this organization, and maybe at certain times it descended more deeply into that. But there were always rather grounded people who you could admire, and so it always had some mitigating features to it. So I'm happy to talk about whether it was a cult, but I'm not comfortable with just leaving the subject. It was a cult. I think it had much more going on.
Well, and hey guys, it's me. Emotionally Unavailable is produced 100% in-house by me with no team. So if the show has ever helped you and you want to give back, subscribe to the Patreon. There's several different levels with different benefits in each. Check the show notes and you can see what each tier subscription will get you. There's also lots of fun things coming down the pipeline for the Patreon subscribers. So get in early. You can get a workbook, you can buy merch, you can do any of the things, and all of that supports the show to help it keep going. Really appreciate every single one of you. I love you so much, and I can't wait to see what we continue to do together. I can see where it would feel like such a noble cause. I did read that the founder was a sympathizer of, now my brain's gone blank, Hitler and Mussolini.
Well, that's a distortion.
Okay.
But certainly people have spread that rumor about him. A sympathizer, he would not be a right way to describe him. He was a bit different from some people in the position that he took about what do you do about Hitler. He was a person who'd put all his eggs into one basket, and that basket was God changes people. We have to live our Christianity better. We have to give people the chance to experience the fullest expression of God in their lives. That will change them. That will give them a vision of a different kind of world. So he was so literal in this belief that he thought it was better not to speak out against Hitler, but to keep the space open for a conversation with Hitler and some of his cronies. And I mean, looking back at that, I feel that was incredibly naive. And people at the time, there were people at the time who said that was naive, but not everybody dismissed it as completely outrageous, because this was a world in which ideas about religion and faith had more space in the conversation.
A lot of nuance.
Days. Yes.
Yeah.
And so
what I'm also feeling like this is so relatable to stuff I talk about all the time in the idea of spiritual bypassing, where really the fundamental problem really was the fact that we're ignoring the outer nuance of the human experience, but providing lots of nuance for spirituality. But this is something I complain about a lot, actually, about the gurus that just constantly spout, if you were more spiritual, you wouldn't have money problems, or you wouldn't be complaining about this if. And I'm like, no. I am as woo-woo as they come. And I will say this. I believe we came here as humans for a reason, and human first, always, always, always. And so I think that's where a lot of the spiritual community from then to now gets this wrong, is we're completely ignoring the fact that we're allowed to have human feelings about our human experiences. So I can certainly see where that created this atmosphere for you where a lot of your feelings in general would be dismissed, because you just need to, tap in, or whatever the verbiage would have been at that time. But I think they're saying the same stuff now. I think a lot of people say that, like, just get in touch with your highest self, or whoever your higher power, God, source, whatever it is. Like, I think that people still say this all the time. So I did wonder, though, was it not common for people to have like a career outside of this organization, but like maybe, let's say, volunteer their time, like on the
Yeah,
weekend or
sure
something?
thing. And there were actually quite a large number of people, maybe more people actually, who
Okay.
were kind of in their, what you might call, normal lives, living in their
Okay.
homes, going to work, etc. Some of those people actually gave money quite generously to keep the organization going. So the numbers of us who would, the phrase was full timers, the ones who were
Yeah.
giving their full time, were maybe a smaller number. And I always thought that, well, if these ideas really work, then it's more interesting to put them to the test when you're out there living your normal life and you're in your job and figuring that
Right.
stuff out. Then when you cut yourself off completely from what normal life really is. So
Right.
I kind of always had that restless feeling, but because my parents were full timers, I didn't feel quite as comfortable in a kind of normal world. So it was a little harder for me to figure out how to move into something that I wanted to move into. And, we had never had a home of our own. We are always living in other people's homes,
Oh,
often in
wow.
countries that we didn't belong to.
Mm-hmm.
The whole question of how this thing was financed, my parents didn't actually have a salary. So, there was
Yeah.
just not extra money to be doing anything with. And
You really had
the
no
culture was
support system outside of that.
reinforcing itself. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh. And so were your parents explicit about kind of wanting their legacy to be their only child to then follow in their footsteps?
They never
They
had to
didn't
say
even
that.
talk about that.
The message was just so obvious. And it was not just to me, but to the children of other couples who I knew in the
Oh,
organization, that a
really?
large number of us we were kind of the baby boom generation of the organization, the ones born after World War II. In many
Mm-hmm.
cases, our parents delayed marriage until the end of the war, and then we were all born in a great swath. And so a lot of us were coming of age in the sort of later 60s, and then of course the world was in some turmoil because of the 60s, and it was easy for our parents to rationalize that they wouldn't encourage us particularly to go to university because they thought that we would get swallowed up in a great mess of
Yeah.
what was going on there. And so there's just all kinds of ways in which the thing just flowed along. And then here I get into my 20s and I'm thinking, my God, what do you do to sort of push back the tide when everything has been pushing you in this direction and you don't seem to be able to respond to your own, hopes and desires? And what is it to be a real person anyway?
Right.
So all of this, suddenly I just felt I had to take charge of this myself. I didn't know how I was going to do it really, except it seemed to me separating myself from the movement was obvious.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that path and anybody who's left a powerful culture or left a very good job and then had to sort of remake their lives. Many people have this experience, but I would say mine was rather extreme in the sense that I was going to go to college. I knew I should go to college. I'd never been to college. Everybody should go to college if they want to, if they have the aptitude for it. And so I was going to do that, but I didn't know how people decided on what college to go to. And then the whole question of, are you supposed to just study stuff that interests you, or are you supposed to be thinking about how you're going to earn money when you get out the other side?
Yes.
And, all these things, how do you find the thing in your heart that leads you to the place where you really want to be and also be
Mm-hmm.
practical about it? And so, here was I almost dealing with a midlife crisis while at the same time as dealing with an adolescent crisis.
Right.
So it was complicated.
God, it really was. So, okay, let me ask you this though, before we move on to like separation from the movement. would you say your experience with your parents was very similar to, like, I would say anyone who's really survived youth group experience here? If you were to, like, present some emotional issue that you were having, and maybe you just didn't at all, but, you're a kid, you have some emotions, whatever happens, and just in your normal everyday experiences, were they very pray it away? Were they people are dying and you're not grateful, like, you need to be more grateful? Like, how did they kind of respond to you being an emotional being?
It's really interesting. I think that maybe I learned that it was better not to be an emotional being. I think my father, who was Scottish, who came out of a culture where people did suppress their emotions, culturally, really was not good at expressing his, and I think was quite a wounded person. So I was not getting a lot of encouragement to
Yeah.
express emotions. And probably they would have felt, if I was angry or disobedient, that what they would do is send me off to listen to God and see what God told me.
Okay.
And so I would be very familiar with that formula from an early age, which again was a way of actually denying emotion, I would say. It was so interesting to me when I discovered this term, which you mentioned earlier, spiritual bypassing, which is actually what it really is psychological bypassing. It's people who
Absolutely.
are in a spiritual environment where psychology is sort of discounted because it's assumed that spiritual truths will actually be adequate to sort you out.
Yep.
But that doesn't help you analyze what's going on. And I came to understand later that with regard to my parents, they had me on board to justify and rationalize their choices. And I somehow felt I had to do that. And that was never stated outwardly. It was something that I internalized. So it was like I felt that their choice to be in this thing had some fragility to it. I wasn't always convinced they were doing it very well or that they always knew what they were doing, and that somehow or other I needed to somehow be in there to make them feel that I approved, that everything was all right, that I could even show that it worked better than they could. So that dynamic, which is actually quite a normal dynamic for a child, to
Yes.
be on board with what the parents are doing because the child feels they have to sort of hold it together, is definitely a dynamic of children in alcoholic families.
I was
Because
thinking that, yeah.
you become very important to your parents. You're somehow holding the whole thing together, and you get a sense of almost omnipotence around this because you recognize, without even putting words to it, how important you are. So this whole idea that a whole dynamic can kind of get organized in a family, I didn't understand that until considerable time after leaving the organization, and being able to sort of look at that from a distance. Also to understand my mother was actually a depressed person, that she suffered postpartum depression. So that again left me feeling a kind of black hole where my mother was supposed to be, and that it was up to me to kind of fill it, that life wasn't going to work unless I sort of stepped up to the plate and made things happen. And so even if I didn't do that particularly well, I was still going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, and that experience is universal. Like, we weren't all in an organization, but yeah, I think a lot of us stepped into that role so young because nobody knew how to, And that's why I try to explain to people a lot, like, it really was never the trauma that messed with us. It was how everyone around us responded when things happened. And the fact that we were never nurtured in a proper manner through really hard times. Like,
Mhm.
so much of the anti-coddle stuff was like exactly what we needed, really. Like, we needed coddling. We needed
Yes.
nurturing. We needed to be spoken sweetly, like we didn't need all the tough stuff. And I get why people did that and why they thought that was the right way. And I perpetuated that cycle myself for many years. And have like just the worst pain when I think about that sometimes, that I was perpetuating that. But I mean, it also gives me great compassion too for how it ever happened. Okay, so I'm curious. You said, all right, this is not working. I want to do this thing, and that's going to require some separation, which, again, this is a huge topic of conversation right now. Also, in this whole like separating from parents, more often they're labeling it no contact and whatever. And some people are having to go to that extreme. But, this is a huge topic right now about why we would take such great lengths to create such separation from our parents. And so, again, I like how well timed this is. But what was that final push that made you go, okay, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to be able to do that?
Interestingly enough, I think the answer to that question is an illness, actually, that I had a ruptured ovarian cyst, although thought it was appendicitis. So I suddenly found myself in hospital and then having surgery and then having to recover from surgery. And there was some way in which I could not hold it all together anymore. I think just a physical fragility meant that I couldn't. So there was some way in which I knew life was not going to be the same after this.
Wow.
It also had several moments of quite severe depression. And so all of this coupled together, I just felt that as I was kind of trying to emerge from that, I think what I just need to do is spend some time at college learning some stuff and kind of being not in this world I've been in. So, I'd always had this desire to study medicine. And so I kind of thought, well, that's what I should do, So I found a school that had a good pre-med program, and I did general chemistry the first and the second semester, which is the biggest slog you could ever dream up. And actually I was doing it pretty well. But of course, I still had to kind of find a confidence that would push me forward in a very, very demanding academic, process, which in the end I backed out of. That person in the pre-med program at Boston University told me I should go find a job, and some medical job, because I needed to test myself as whether I really liked this, which was good advice, except that I had never had to look for a job in my entire life.
Okay, what do we do?
So the whole idea of kind of creating a resume, how do I sort of make my life look like a normal life on this resume? And then what do I do next? And, I got some distance down that, but it was just all so intimidating. I was kind of praying to God to take away the desire to do this. So then, I got into, I knew I was a good writer. I tried the journalism school at Boston University, was told that I should write a novel, that I was not a journalist.
Oh, God.
Then I found the history department, and I really loved that. I loved history of ideas. And so I took the degree in history, found international relations, but in some ways was finding my way back to some of the preoccupations of the organization I'd grown up in, and maybe was sort of still trying to sort all that out. Freud has written about what he called the repetition compulsion, which is that we go back again and again to the familiar thing.
Yep.
Where we were traumatized.
Yep.
Because we're trying to relive it in a different way, try and live it in a better way.
Get a different
outcome.
outcome.
And I can certainly see that. So I got a PhD in international relations. It was a slog, of course, and I did doctoral research in Northern Ireland. That was actually kind of fun. It was,
Wow.
People all spoke English. Most of the time I could understand their English. and they love to talk, so it wasn't hard to interview them. And so it was pretty interesting.
And were you having contact with your parents during this?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. What was that contact like? Were they happy to hear from you?
Oh, yes. And they were supportive. I mean, they didn't know how to help me make decisions about specific things terribly well. I didn't share a lot of my insecurities, but I don't think more than a week would go by that I wouldn't phone them.
Okay.
Or they me. And they were very proud of me when I graduated.
Okay.
So, sorry.
You're fine. Were they, this is going to be a rude question, but were they like of average intelligence?
They were very smart people, my parents.
Okay.
Both of them. They were both college graduates, and readers.
Okay.
And they shared their reading, and they shared their reading with me. And some of the letters that I've looked at of me is when I left home, sort of age 18, 19, 20, and went off with this organization and was writing letters to my parents, was very often writing about what books I was reading. So I can see that I had some advantages over some of the others in the group who I think didn't get that kind of reading as much.
Yeah.
And a sense of history, I think Dad really gave that to me, a kind of framework upon which you can pin information and your understanding of the world. And I think that's what studying history wonderfully does. And also I had quite a good high school education in Glasgow, Scotland.
Okay.
Scotland has good schools. It's traditionally always had good education. And so, I was given my whole first year of university on the basis of having done high school and advanced level exams in Britain.
Wow.
So yes, we were, and the whole of moral rearmament, you'd have to say the generation older than me, they were generally college graduates.
Wow.
And some from Ivy League schools. I mean, this organization was first called the Oxford Group because of the large number of students from Oxford University who were involved in it.
Wow.
So, I mean, this was all made it harder to argue with it because these people were self-confident in their ideas.
Right.
And one of the things I've learned about cults, interestingly, and we can debate whether this was a cult or not, but that actually people who are attracted by ideas are more attracted to cults because cults are generally based on some idea. And so it's the idea rather than the practicality that holds people there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. So, okay. I'm imagining all of the holes, proverbially, that are needing to be filled by the time you reach PhD level. I imagine some of them were filled from creating educational success for yourself, particularly without like real support. By the time you reached PhD level and completed that, where were you emotionally? Like, did you get the sense that, oh, this is maybe not going to feel the way I thought it was going to feel if I did all of these things?
There certainly was a moment before finishing the PhD when I was kind of in that international relations thing and realizing it was a slog and realizing that I honestly didn't know whether this is going to emerge as something I'd like. And that was when I decided to start thanking God for the wilderness, that I would just have to accept the fact that the wilderness was what really defined me. And I didn't know where I was heading. Then, I did realize as soon as I got started on the doctoral research, I felt like I knew something more about who I was, that I had a goal. I was doing research on a particular subject. I was going around interviewing people. I could talk quite eloquently on this rather narrow subject, but still I could do that. And so I felt suddenly like I felt more whole, even though I didn't yet have a job in that field. Then I managed to get a job when I finished my PhD. It was in the world of college teaching. It wasn't the most stellar job in the sense that it was not offering tenure, which is what you really want. You're going to stick around in colleges. It was a non-tenure track job, but nonetheless, it was a job, and it was in Washington, D.C., which is a lot better than teaching international relations in some little village in the Midwest or something.
Right.
So I felt fortunate. I felt fortunate and kind of excited, and I almost didn't check in with myself about, do I like this or not, in a substantive sense, but in the sense of, my gosh, I've landed somewhere. I've got a job, all of those things. It was great. And it was very hard work. The job was hard work. And often I had the experience of going into a class and feeling not entirely ready, or, having to sort of invent things as I went along, and realizing you can actually do that, and finding greater self-confidence as a result. So it was wonderful to have landed and kind of recognize that I'd paid a price by having chosen a path that had so much delayed gratification that I had to do that PhD thing. Maybe I didn't need to do that, but somehow I felt like I did. Like I had to earn sort of a place in society or something. Anyway, there I was. So, on the emotional side, though, I had quite a few men had streamed through my life and out the other side, and I felt lonely. I was lonely so much of the time. I felt like there were women friends I could make friends with who had sort of approximations of some of the same issues I did, but nobody really had a life like I'd had. And so, and then the men I was meeting somehow were not able to take on board quite what a huge thing I'd done, or that. And there was a way in which I came across as partly intimidating, because I'd lived in all these places and I had a PhD and all that stuff. And people didn't realize that inside I just felt so small and inadequate, and just wanting somebody to pay attention and take my story on board and nourish me. And so, it was so interesting how I didn't feel that the men I met were really up for that at all. And, so, I would then ask myself, what's wrong with me that I can't stay longer in a relationship? But then I'd say, but I was true to myself to end that because I wasn't having a good time. And so I'm going back and forth on this all the time.
Yes. God,
feeling sad that I didn't have children. I considered adopting children. I went to sessions through adoption agencies where you could do international adoption. Then I thought that I couldn't do this alone, so I wouldn't do it. And so, yes, I was just constantly trying to sort of keep casting out the fishing line to find new ways to make deeper connection. I think that what saved me in all that was actually the principle of not thinking too much about yourself, but really being concerned for the needs of others helped me to keep my orientation outwards, and to reach out and do things, to organize dinner parties or whatever it was, to kind of keep a social life going, even if it didn't look quite the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
I found that attending church was helpful because I just made friends there. That people in a church are likely to be more kind of receptive and interested in other people, although this was, of course, more true with some people than with others. But, I found some great people that way. I joined tennis clubs. I tried joining a political party at one time, and that was interesting. I realized how out of the culture I was for that.
You're like, it's been too long.
Various kinds of volunteer work that I tried, and I'm thinking, damn it, I spent so many years of my life as a volunteer. Why should I volunteer now? I sort of didn't get what the point of that was for
early release for time for... Right. I get that. So you never married?
So I finally married 7 years ago.
Okay.
And this came about as an utter surprise to me. And I married someone who, like me, had grown up in the organization of moral rearmament.
No, that's
I had
crazy.
therefore known him, but not really known him, but we knew of each other. We kind of were in the same crowd. I also knew his sister, and some of his cousins were involved. And he had been married, and then his wife passed away. And he and his wife had somewhat distanced themselves from the organization. He had gotten a job outside of the organization, and they were not necessarily analyzing it in quite the same way I was, but I felt like he and I had both concluded that we needed a life outside, in spite of the friends whom we stayed in touch with who were in the organization. So that coming together was a really delightful surprise, and rather an illogical marriage, in the sense that I was this nerd who had acquired all these degrees, and he had never had any interest in going to university at all, and had ended up going to theater school and became an actor. And his late wife had been an actress. So the acting thing was big for them. And I thought that was just so not me. There's were ways in which I was somewhat alarmed that some of the things that I thought I valued so much for my life were just not things that he was valuing that much for his life. And he had to move to the United States. He'd never lived here. This was a huge decision. And so I had to make this decision, you would say, in faith. I had moments of asking myself, is this right? But we were kind of, age had something to do with this. I felt like it's now or never. And
yeah, you're like, well, if I break up this, there's a good chance nothing else is coming behind it.
Nothing else is going to come down the road, you see. Yes, exactly. So, but, and so we recognized there was a sort of arranged marriage feel to this. But the lovely, lovely thing about my husband, Philip, is that he is not trying to prove anything to anybody. He is so into doing what he likes because he enjoys doing it.
Love that.
Not trying to be ambitious. And therefore that disengages all my tendencies to want to be something other than I really am.
Yeah.
And to just relax into being myself.
Yeah.
And there's been such a gift that he has given me. We have both got a good sense of humor. We both have a great love of the English language. He's also very musical, and I get great joy from that also. So we have a number of things that are common to our life apart from the history of this organization.
Yeah.
So we just had our 7th wedding anniversary, and we feel enormously blessed by this marriage. And when I look back at these different people who wanted to marry me, who I considered marrying or dated for some time, and felt the resonance of recognizing things in the other person, was kind of absent. But with Philip, I feel that amongst these things I've said to you, that we have things that we recognize in each other and we get joy from. And so it doesn't mean that I feel it makes sense to have waited until I was 70 to get married, but I am just recognized that I was blessed with this.
Yes, I love that. Happy anniversary, by the way.
Thank you.
So I have to ask, though, if you grew up with emotionally unavailable parents in an organization that was also pretty emotionally unavailable, spent a lot of time studying, which doesn't typically lend itself to real emotional exploration, I'm wondering if there's been struggles with like vulnerability or being a little too aloof, are you guys just taking what is that word that I can't stand? What is that? Oh, darn it. it's this movement of like, my brain is just tired today, but it's like, it's right there on the tip of my tongue, but it's like, I understand that I'm the only one in charge of my feelings and you're the only one in charge of your feelings. And so if that's how you feel, that's not my fault, which obviously I believe in to a certain extent. And there's nuance here. What is the damn word? Oh, this is driving me crazy. But, like stoicism. That's it.
Stoicism. Oh, I see.
Like,
Well,
how are y'all managing emotional stuff?
Mean, there is some truth in the fact that I mean, as we're both Brits, Philip and I, and that is a culture that has tended to repress emotion. And so we're not the most demonstrative emotionally. And so if one of us is trying to kind of raise the temperature there, it's probably me more than him. Which isn't to say that Philip doesn't have emotions. I find it very interesting that I think Philip feels things very, very deeply.
I'm
and
sure
that
he does.
his tendency to not show it is about the fact that he's probably feeling it more. That the notion that he's going to things will get out of control may have occurred to him when he was very young.
Yes.
And so I think it's lovely to discover Philip's emotions, to see when they emerge and to point it out to him. And so that's one lovely thing.
Well, you're over here like creating a scientific experiment over his emotions just to analyze and understand them. Are you a Virgo? I'm in love with you.
Yes.
Okay. I thought so. I was like, well, you give earth sign, but you're a writer and you like have that part of you. So I was like, Virgo. Okay, this is so great. I'm so pleased. Okay. Well, and also I would imagine that in your 70s, some of the issues and insecurities that are there when you're in your 20s just kind of aren't there in your 70s that create a lot of that emotional explosion. Is that right?
Of course, I think there is truth in that some of the thing you are getting more comfortable in your own skin. We would hope that everybody who matures at some level does find that more. And I do think that's true. It doesn't mean that I don't have my moments, in the groups that we operate with. And I guess everybody's like this, but you are hoping for something from another person, some approval, some valuing
there are
of you.
Some expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when they don't meet those expectations, it brings me up short. And I realize that there is a way in which I'm quite vulnerable and I have to deal with that. I have to sort of ask myself, is this a moment where I need to go and talk to that person? Or is it actually a moment where I need to turn this thing around and move out of that frame of vulnerability and take charge of the interaction by doing something myself?
Yeah.
And I'm learning to do that.
Oh, how beautiful.
I have a wonderful godson, who, when he was born, his parents asked me to be his godmother, and little did we know what this relationship would be like 35 years later. But he is a person who has a lot of awareness of his emotion. And I think that's been a great blessing for me to have him in my life, because it has been another person, a different kind of relationship. And there's, since I don't have children, a way to understand a little bit also what it's like to be a parent. To pour out your emotion for another person, not always knowing quite how this is going to land or whether it's what they need, and realizing that we're all a little in the wilderness with all of that, and being able to check in with myself more. And I think I look forward to actually more conversations with him about these things, because I feel like he's brought a wisdom into my life and into Philip's life, which will continue.
Does Philip have children?
No.
Okay. This is so just sweet. I love this so much. It seems so perfect, honestly. Like, obviously, no relationship is perfect, but it really seems like you guys met each other at the right time.
Well,
you know what I mean. Come back
I don't know
together.
if it was the right time, but his wife had passed away, so in that sense, he was free. And of course, we have moments of wondering if we had met each other 50 years ago, would this have worked? And it might have, but it might not have. I don't really know. I feel like it worked now, and I think it worked in part. For me, it maybe worked better because I had all these different men in my life and realized how inadequate they were. And so,
Yes.
it gave me a greater stake in deciding this. And I think in the end, I had to decide I was going to make it work. I think Philip was very happy to be in it. And knowing that he was moving to the United States, he was moving onto my territory, he was moving into this rather different culture, and probably wasn't aware of all the things that he wasn't aware of and stuff. And so I just had to decide we're going to make this work. And I feel like we are, and we continue to, and every so often I look at him there and I'm thinking, oh my God, how did this ever happen? But
love you. This has been so great. I have had such a good time with you. Tell us where we can find you.
So I have a website that is margareteastmansmith.com.
Okay,
and
are you on that website anywhere?
I'm on Facebook. Okay. I write a blog that gets posted on a website called We Are One Humanity.
Okay.
And you can see those blogs also on my website.
Okay, perfect.
And my website also features my new book, A Spectacular Inheritance.
Oh, it sounds amazing. This is like I have really enjoyed talking with you. Like, really, I appreciate your time so much because this is just a different perspective of things and it's a part of the same conversation that I'm used to having, but it's so different too. And I just have loved every minute of it.
Well, I loved it too, Melissa. Very good to meet you. And yeah.
Let's keep in touch.
I'd like that. I hope we can.
Okay, I'd love to have you back.
Good. Thank you. Love to see you again.
Well, make sure you check the show notes, audience, because I will put that in there. And check Margaret out. Get this book. It sounds amazing. Okay, Margaret, I'm going to press stop if you'll hang out for 1 sec.
I will.
Thanks for coming to Emotionally Unavailable. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share.
Emotionally unavailable.
All right, that's it from me. So make sure that you check out the show notes for links. And until next time, let's all just keep swimming.
INDEPE and cut.